go. Hey guys, welcome back to another video on Touchscreen. Today we've got a special episode with Jamie O'Connor, that's the CEO of Touch Football Australia. Hey Jamie, how you going?
I'm good, Tom. Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me along, mate. Yeah.
No, not a problem, and thanks for coming on. And today's topic is about the National Touch League 2024 structure that was released last year. It's a bit of a change, and we've had sort of mixed reactions on those. So what we want to do today is sort of answer any sort of concerns that the public may have before they actually start showing up and seeing it for themselves, just to get them sort of mentally prepared. So first thing I want to ask is, when was there a turning point last year or even in 2022 where you thought that a change is probably needed?
Mate, to be fair, Tom, it probably goes way back before that. I think the real catalyst, a lot of the messaging that we put around this, I think the real catalyst was 2018. We reviewed NTLs at that point in time. When the NRL Touch Premiership dropped into our format and our calendar, it gave us an understanding or an opportunity that for the elite player to be withdrawn out of NTL and what the impact that might have been. There was no way that we wanted to run, obviously, Elite 18 and NRL Touch Premiership in the same year. We were talking a lot of the same brands outside of New South Wales brands were going to be rebranded alongside the NRL clubs, and we're going to drop into game days and play regularly week in, week out in and amongst NRLs and NRL stadiums. When that happened, we recognised that Elite 8 would come out of NTLs, and that would then probably force a change on T-League. So we undertook a review in 2018. We put some changes in place for a 2-year period at that point in time, and went, let's have a look see what this is, see what the impact of premiership is, with the intention of reviewing it again in another 24 months, which got us into 2020, which then pushed us into COVID. So there was always an intention to have another deep dive dig into what NTLs would look like on the basis that premiership was taking the elite player out. So it's been something that's been on our radar for 4 or 5 years now. Like we're in the early part of 2024 now, and that review was done in 2018. We lose 2 or 3 years of COVID and whatnot. But yeah, it's one that's been on our agenda for quite some time, because the participation across the event has been in, you would argue, steady decline. Team numbers might be, sort of fairly stable, but the stabilisation of team numbers is really coming from the addition of divisions.
Yeah, okay. It's funny you mentioned 2019 being sort of a year of change. That was actually my first NTLs that I was involved with, and I do remember everyone sort of not so much against the change of getting rid of Elite 8. It was just sort of we don't know, and that's what's worrying us, is we don't know what it's going to look like. And that turned out to be, well, I was never at an NTLs. I watched Elite 8, but it seemed like everyone sort of just adapted pretty quickly when they saw the quality of the men's open and women's open divisions.
Yeah.
So structural wise, going into it, what we've heard is days shortened to 3 days, and games shortened to 15-minute halves.
Yep.
So questions I've got around 15-minute halves, but most of these questions come from like New South Wales area. Queensland, I believe their state cup is 2 15-minute halves.
Yes, I believe so. I believe so, mate. That one's off the top of my head. I believe Queensland's always been an advocate for halves, but Queensland have never had, turnaround that we play in New South Wales, and the length of and the history of a state cup that's been played in New South Wales hasn't happened in Queensland. They're getting there now. I think they're through 3 or 4 state cups. Oddly enough, got rid of their state championships for similar troubles that we're having around NTL. Is that regional support for those events across the board was really, really struggling. So they got rid of their state champs and went to a state cup, and I think went from 30 odd teams in 1 year to it may have been just short of 100 teams in their
wow,
year.
So
state cup. So it's by the by, but so we will go. So part of some of the feedback that we got from over a long period of time has always been 4 days is too long for the event. Oddly enough, that's I think it's me personally. I think it's one of the great parts of the event is that people get a chance to go away and play a lot of touch. Traditional format, 2 20-minute halves. When you're playing in that format, you can't really have 3 games is okay, but you can't really have 4 games in a day. Our athletes can't cope with that. It's just far too much touch. no matter how good and how fit you are. At some point in time, our athletes are going to break down. So the load is a concern for us. But a lot of the feedback we've had around, particularly from regions when we had discussions at the back end of 2022 about how can we grow the event, the one thing that continued to come up and has historically come up was it would be easy to get people to play in the event if the event was 3 days and they didn't have to take as much time off work to go and play. So we took that on board, shortened the event. I think the change in the format in this and the change of focus from delivering high performance outcomes, we don't think it won't deliver high performance outcomes, but our focus won't be driven by preparing athletes to play at an elite level or play for Australia, as has been done historically. We've used it as a tool for our athletes to be able to prepare for international touch. With removing the need, we think removing the need for that, shortening the event up, gives us an opportunity to be able to play around with the actual game format. We're still really strong advocates for the fact that the coach needs to be given an opportunity to be able to coach, and we don't think that happens so much in turnaround touch. So I think for sure, right?
Like, yeah, because I'm like, sorry to interrupt, but I'm a coach and I coach New South Wales State Cup, and it is very difficult. If something's not going your way to try and help turn that around. So I love the fact that it's still halftime, and I think that the 3 days, while I like more touch and I like the fact that it's 4 days because I get to spend more time at a tournament, 3 days is smart. A lot of my friends are school teachers, and they find it really difficult to get time off in term one because they're setting up their year. So I think you're 100% right. That those changes, I think, are very, very good. Like, I think that'll really help.
And there's still 50-50, Tom. Like, we've had a lot of people come to us now, particularly like people out in North Queensland. North Queensland's participation in NTL's waned over the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah, they won.
But a lot of the
feedback, they made grand final in 2020, the men's open. I don't think they actually had a team last year.
No, and they've disappeared since. The last couple of years, it's really been, I think it's men's 50s and 55s and a women's 50s is the only 3 teams they've had in the last 12, maybe the last 1 or 2 iterations of NTL. But a lot of the feedback we're getting is we're going to travel all this way for 3 days of touch. We're not going to come. So no matter which way we go, right, no matter what decision we make, we're going to upset some who love the 4-day format and upset some, who don't like the 4-day format and aren't going to come.
Well, I think one thing I've said to people is 3-day format is going to suit everyone that it suits for 4 days, but 4 days is not necessarily going to suit everyone that can do 3 days. So
for sure. Yep.
Yeah, I actually really like that. So something else that is sort of people have been asking now, again, a lot of the reason why I'm making this video is because there is information out there. I've found a lot of, like you said, the frequently asked questions, and there was a PDF file sort of explaining the reasoning behind all this. But it just, to me, it just found a little bit hard to reach. I had to go into the website. So this just hopefully is a bit more accessible and people sort of understand a little bit more. But a lot of people are talking about the Touch Premiership, the NRL Touch Premiership. Is that a confirmed thing that's happening this year or next year or?
No, the boards, we're all deeply committed to it. There's lots of moving parts, as you'd imagine, with trying to pull something like an NRL Touch Premiership together. We're deeply committed to 2024 and the Premiership coming back. We're hopeful the next month we'll see a lot of information sort of start to flow in that'll allow us to make some decisions. Obviously, we've got a change in NTL format, which is a fairly big major piece of change going on. And we've got a World Cup with more teams than what we've ever sent to any World Cup going away, literally to the other side of the world into the UK in the middle of the year. And that's going to put our coaches under pressure. It's going to put our elite athletes under pressure. We need to be able to prepare them. So we're going to have, multiple training camps leading up to a mid-July World Cup. So we're just conscious
busy.
of where we place it. Yeah, it is. It's a really busy time. We like the idea of having it between, NTL and the restart of Vorden Cups and Metro Cups and the like. We think that's probably the ideal window. This year, that's going to be an uncomfortable window. So we're just playing around with some models as to how we might be able to pull it together. But NRL Touch Premiership will come back. The board is deeply committed to making sure that is back on our agenda, back in our calendar this year. We'll make that work somehow.
Cool. So this one's a follow up from that, but it's mainly
Yep.
targeted at the opens divisions. Picking for something like State of Origin. A lot of
Yep.
times in the past that we coaches have looked at people from NTLs. Would that now
Yep.
move from NTLs onto the Touch Premiership, or are you hoping that it's still both?
Oh, look, it's a New South Wales and Queensland call. They run their TID how they choose to run their TID. Most of us, and we certainly have at a national level, we've evolved away from watching, one event and picking teams from that. Our World Cup teams will be picked prior to NTL this year anyhow. They've got camps leading into the next couple of weeks. Yeah, our teams our teams should be picked before NTL, so we don't rely on one event where we ID our talent from. We've got a pretty good reach right across the country, and we've got a really good understanding of who's playing well and who's not playing well at any given time. I would imagine that the same thing's happening with State of Origin. State of Origin is not until at some point in 2025. It sort of switches between
Yeah.
August or October, but it'll be the back half of 2025. There's plenty of opportunity for New South Wales and Queensland to be able to identify their talent. They both do it differently.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I wouldn't know how, because I'm from New South Wales. I don't know how Queensland do theirs, but I think the concern out of that is people are worried. Like a lot of people, they love the idea of going to watch the best players, and
Yeah.
I think now that there's sort of okay, there's more opportunities for people to do that, but will teams from WA and that could
Yeah.
it deter them maybe because their men's open team might be going up and playing basically like the equivalent of a state cup, like the same teams from a state cup.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
makes
mate, I
sense.
think
I
it's
hope that
more.
made sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does absolutely. I think it actually works in the favour of someone like WA. WA, particularly in their men's, have always been pretty strong. ACT women have traditionally been pretty strong, not so much in their men's. But I think if you put a full strength ACT women's team into let's call it diluted, right? That's probably not the right word, but we'll call it a diluted um, talent pool across the board. WA is probably more competitive than what they would be. They've never made a NTL final in its existing format, but they may well make an NTL final in a future format.
Yep.
I think it.
And
I
I
think it's quite.
guess too, if you might find a WA, I have no idea. This is just speculating, but there might be some good players in like Broome or something and WA might be based out of Perth, and it might be
Yeah.
too hard to travel and stuff like that, so they can send their own team. So there's definitely pros and then concerns about it as well.
It's a
Um,
great a great example, Tom, because Broome are the example that we use from time to time. When I first started with TFA, there was a need for me to go there, and I went in for a day and then sort of come back home. And Broome expressed that exact same sentiment that
oh,
they
okay.
find it really difficult to access that. Now, not maybe in a men's opens, but they were talking about a men's 40s team at that point in time, going, disposable income, want to play touch, they love the game, they don't feel like they have access to it. The WA champs and the offerings in WA is far improved to what it was 5 years ago. So they feel like they have access now. But it's a great example. We use Broome as an example. If they want to, they're not going to come every year, right? Because it's going to be expensive to do it. But
Yeah.
if every now and then they want to jump on a flight and get a team together and come and play in a national championships, why should we stop that?
Yep. And I use the example, a couple of people, I was actually talking to Tim, one of your staff members, about because I'm from Hornets, the Hunter Western
Yeah,
Hornets, and we're the Hunter Western Hornets because we have
yeah,
Dubbo and Mudgee. And
yeah,
traditionally juniors is different. We structure it so we can cater for our Western players, but in seniors, all our training is traditionally on the coast, unless
for
you might
sure.
have 9 players from Mudgee in a team, but it's very difficult for Mudgee, who's getting very strong
Yeah,
especially in juniors, to play for their region. So
yeah.
I like the fact that isolated areas, and I'm sure there's plenty in Queensland as well, can actually go without the need to spend, I don't know, 6 days worth of travel because of their training schedule.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I had the same conversation with Joel Bagnall. I don't want to repeat, private conversations, but had the same conversations with Joel until the regional boundary was changed. Orange found the same thing, and they got a tremendous
Yes,
program coming through the same thing, and they found it really difficult to access. I hate the word pathway because they have access to the pathway, but they find it really difficult just through the tyranny of distance. It just makes it difficult for them. And then you magnify that when you get into places like North Queensland, where you've got, Townsville's the epicenter of North Queensland, and you've got Cairns that's, let's call it 4 hours north, Mackay's 4 hours south. They're the two other major sort of areas that touch is drawn from. But you get someone from Mount Isa, it's a 10-hour one-way trip to come to Townsville and train, so they just don't do it.
Yeah. So Mount
Yeah,
Isa is still North Queensland, are they?
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. Yep.
Yep.
There
That's
you
their
go.
nearest point, 10-hour one-way trip, and they do it because they have to. But it makes it really, really difficult.
So, in your opinion, do you think that it's going to impact those, like having those extra teams there, like you're isolated? Is that going to? Are you expecting that's going to impact the big regions like Scorpions and like Hornets, and then your South Queensland Sharks? Do you think they will still have their core players play for them, or do you reckon they will go to their affiliate?
I think it'll go from one region to the next. Scorps, I think off the top of my head now, just had a look at some numbers on this the other day. I think Scorps have got 18 teams coming away, which is the most teams they've had. So more than one team in each of the divisions, or in some divisions rather. So it certainly hasn't had an impact on Hornets. I'm not sure where Hills are up to. Hills were talking about sending teams. I know Northern Beaches are sending teams, and they're all coming from the Scorps region. Haven't seen too much come out of the Hornets region by way of affiliate team, but I think that'll
We
change.
almost there was talk, rumors about Central Coast sending their men's
Yep.
open side.
Yep.
That was all rumors. I never heard that from Central Coast.
Yeah.
But and from when you talk about Northern Beaches, the feedback that I've received there is their young group, who actually just played in the men's open at State Cup and did quite well, have never
Yeah.
really had a look in to play
Of
for the
course.
Scorpions because
Yeah.
their core group has been there so long, and they're sort of starting to age a little bit, but they haven't actually retired for spots
Yeah.
to come in. So they just want to play.
Yeah.
Whether or not if they trialed for Scorps and then didn't make it, so they put the Northern Beaches team in, I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
yeah,
That
looking at the Scorps men's open side, the women's open side, they're just next level. But looking at the men's open
yeah,
side, it does seem to be consistent with the last couple of years. So
for sure. And like that's man, it's a really good point you make, because it's one of the examples that we've been pointing to. And I look, I'm from Newcastle, right? Born and bred from here. So I sort of look at the Hornets stuff, and you look at State Cup that's just been run, Central Coast finally knock off the guns at Doyleson, and you got probably two of the very elite teams playing men's opens touch at the moment, all from the one region, and we're trying to squeeze them into one spot, and fill a Hornets team, and the rest of them miss out, right? And Carly as coach, I do the same thing. Not that they'd want me coaching, but I'd do the same thing if I was Carly. I'd take the tried and true and tested that have done the job for me at Doyleson and pull them into the vast majority of them into my Hornets team. And you've got this really young, talented group of Central Coast kids that, not kids, young men that are missing out and not quite getting their opportunity. And they will over time. The Doyleson, the average age of the Doyleson group's older than the Central Coast, and it'll eventually shift. We're probably sort of starting. They might not like hearing that, but they're probably sort of starting to see the shift towards the Central Coast dominance. But and we're seeing the same thing in Scorps. The Manly women's team have just been so dominant domestically for, I can't remember when they haven't been. And then you've got a young.
to answer that, I think it's 2018 was the last
Yeah,
time I saw them lose a game in finals.
Crazy, right? Then they get off track, but you see them at State Cup and they look tired and they look like they're going to get beaten, and they squeeze their way through the round games, and then when it comes to the big games, they just get it done.
Yeah.
They're phenomenal. But you've got a really young Northern Beaches women's team, and you've got a really young Hills Hornets, super talented Hills Hornets group of girls coming through too, and they just don't have access to be able to squeeze their way into the score. So whilst you've got some areas like North Queensland where it's really hard to convene teams, you've got these regions where you've got massive population, pockets of population, and talented playing population all trying to squeeze into one. It just doesn't fit.
And it's not like these Hills Hornets players, because they're affiliated with Scorps, they can't exactly go and play for the Rebels or anything like that, because there's rules in place there. So in a way, it's sort of like a branch from the Scorpions is like a sort of another representative of Scorpions just branched out into the to the Hills brand.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
sort of what we're getting at? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the two more things to cover. One is there's been some concerns about eligibility requirements.
Yeah.
I know we have, like in New South Wales Stuck Up, we have points if players there's player movement and stuff. If you're underage, there's only so many players that you can actually pick up
Yeah.
across your whole club. Is there
Yeah.
going to be any sort of policing with player movement and NTLs and that sort of stuff?
Yes,
So say there would be. I
yeah,
imagine there would be, but it's just that some people aren't sure.
there is. Look, we all have different philosophies. Each of our organisations have different philosophies on what we're trying to achieve out of some of this stuff, right? Our board and our leadership team have a really strong decision-making filter, is what we refer to it as, and we come back to it all the time. And our thinking is just let them play. So whilst we don't want to be too flippant about that, and it's just going to be a free-for-all, and you see stacked teams end up in one spot, we won't allow that to happen. But we're probably a little bit more or a little less rigid. We won't go down a point system path. I don't think that's healthy for the event and for what we're trying to achieve out of this event, where we just want people coming together and playing and accessing a national event. So we won't go too tightly around eligibility, but yeah, it's policed. Oddly enough, so in New South Wales, there's a player loan system in place, and it's New South Wales Touch administer it. We approve it, but it goes into Dean and his staff. The player loan goes into there, and and you'll see it this year, the Central Coast group that went last year and played for Suns, the boys that couldn't make the Hornets men's team, a bunch went to Suns. This year, I believe they're going to Mets, and that's all managed by South Wales Touch. They're closest to it. We like the system they've got in place. We approve it because we think it's a good system.
So you're happy for that sort of stuff to continue? So you're sort of overseeing the states? Yep.
It still gets approved by us, but it gets administered by New South Wales. And as long as we understand the parameters, and New South Wales, Dean and his team share their live document with us, so we've got a really good, clear view of who's going where. And if we don't like the look and feel of something, then we'll knock something on the head.
Yep. No, fair enough.
Yeah.
So this is good because a lot of we weren't going to specifically talk about this, especially at the start, but a lot of the immediate feedback came when you announced the changes it was a cash grab.
Yeah. Everything's a cash grab.
Yeah, and I think that at first glance, that's probably what it looked like. Yeah. And it wasn't until I did some more digging and had a bit more thought of it that I understood, okay, it's not going to be. It's like me personally, I don't care about the changes. I just want to go there and enjoy the tournament. I don't care how it's done, as long as I come home and I was like, that was good. I really enjoyed it. I want to go back next year. And I guess the fear of not knowing what it's going to look like, I guess, scares a lot of people. But no, it's excellent points that you're making. But something that I've brought up, and you might not have actually given this much thought. I'm not sure if this is yours, but match officials, so referees. In the past, you had to be a minimum of a level 4.
Yep.
I've noticed that's still the same.
I know. So we've got I think it's 230 expressions of interest from referees to come.
So we're not going to be short.
We're not going to be short. No, and I know that's
okay. That's good.
Right? And I get that. Like, we don't want to turn up and have, 50 good referees. Not that any referee is a bad referee, but we don't want 50 really elite referees, and then the standard drops away really quickly, and we see the standard of the game impacted by that. Everything we talk about, and it's all across our strategic plan, is about enhancing experience. So we want you to come away, have a great experience, whether it's 3 days or 4 days. It's 3 at the moment. We'll consider that over the next couple of years, but we want you to come away, have a great experience. And part of that is making sure that referee performance is of the highest order. When we talk about, we hear all this stuff about cash grab, right? But our sport, we've never invested more in our sport. We spend over 300 grand on referee development. We've just appointed a referee high performance manager. We've just resurrected the NRS. We've got a talented group that sits behind that. We're spending more on technology and supporting our referees. We're fully funding our emus to go to the World Cup, our Opens emus players to go to the World Cup for the first time. So
that's awesome.
So whilst people look at it and go, it's a cash grab, it's not a cash grab. It's the conversation, and I've said this to a number of people confidentially. I'd be happy to share, as long as the board's comfortable. I'd be happy to show certain people our board papers, and never at any point in time has revenue been discussed. And we caught up with the regions I referenced earlier. We caught up with the regions at a meeting at the back end of 2022, and the question kept coming up about if we could just see what the financial model looks like. And I went, there's no financial model on this because we're not doing it for financial motives. We'll make the model work. So whilst we understand the perception that this is a cash grab, and it's the same with the new membership model, we've got the same feedback that this is just a cash grab. What we're trying to do is reduce the amount of money that our individuals who play the sport on a regular basis continue to put their hand in their pocket. We're trying to reduce the impact on those athletes or those participants, and we've never invested more money back into the sport. So ultimately, I'm a fan of other sports, right? I'm a fan of the NRL, and I want Andrew Abdo to be sitting there, and I want him doing everything he can to drive more money into the game, right? Because the more money they can drive into the game, the more that they can spend on the game, and the more sustainable that it becomes.
Scott Prince does a good job with that.
For sure, yes.
He's a good advocate for touch football.
Yeah. So the more money we've got coming into the game, the more that we can invest back into it.
Yeah, and I agree. And something that we've all probably got to remember is you're not going to go out there and do anything that's going to make the game worse. Your goal is to make the game bigger and better. And I think when there's any form of change, and from New South Wales, our state cup very rarely has big changes. I've never really seen a massive change. Yep. And I think just the idea of change might sort of throw people off a little bit. I think the most we've had change is maybe what our divisions are called. But I was actually, speaking of divisions, that was the last thing I was going to ask. Is there going to be different divisions? So, for example, are the Sydney Scorpions going to be playing against Mount Isa, or will that be split?
It'll depend. So it all depends on team numbers, but we would expect in Open's division, we would expect that there'll be a segmentation of it like an A and B division, no different to what we see at state. Right? You've got, whilst Mount Isa might want to play Scorps and Uni Rebels and these really elite teams, the really elite teams don't want to go away and play Mount Isa 4 times, right? So there'll be a progression. And there'll be, a segmentation based on the number of teams. If we happen to get 20 men's 40s teams nominate, we would do the same thing in the men's 40s division where we would segment out at some point in time. It might not start that way, but it might be the old state cup model where everyone was in, and then day 2 and day 3 you sort of start to find
it's a grading day on the first day. That's good. That's good. I'm glad you're there, because the last thing I want to do is, like, I go there and coach, and as soon as I'm finished coaching, I just want to watch games, and I don't want to go and watch a 19-1 game.
For sure.
If you know what I mean. It's just
that's right. And no one playing the 19-1 game. But oddly enough, the team who gets beaten 19-1 is probably more excited about playing that game than the team who wins 19-1.
Yep. First time I ever played my first ever men's open game was against East Roosters, and they just won the previous year, and we got smashed. But I played against the East Roosters, and they had some Australian representatives, and it was awesome. Well, I think that might do us. I've got really nothing else to sort of bring up. I've sort of trimmed down a couple of really long messages that people sent me, but I think we've covered everything. But mate, thanks very much for coming on. It's made me even it's been a lot clearer for me to understand what we're going up with in March. So hopefully, fingers crossed, people will come away from NTLs this year and think it wasn't that bad after all.
No, well, that's
happy with it.
Yeah, like I don't. For those who continue to go away, for those who have been going away, will continue to go away, and it won't look and feel a great deal different. It certainly won't look and feel worse. We're hoping that some of the stuff that we're doing around the view of the event will only make the event better than what it has been before. So hopefully that the experience of those that have been going for 25 years is refreshed this year when they get there.
And numbers for NTLs are looking good?
Numbers for NTLs are looking great, mate. We've gone from whatever it was, 130-something teams last year to 176 this year.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And that's good too, because I was worried originally that I actually really liked the fact that I could drive in and get a park, and I could line up and get a coffee, and I wouldn't be waiting for half an hour. So I was worried the numbers were going to quadruple, and it was just going to be just so many people, but that's actually a really good number. So that's made me
Yeah,
happy.
I think our like we had as I said before, we'd done no modelling on this, and we had no expectation as to what it could look like. We feared that it might have got out of control, but our gut feel was that there was so much angst around the change and uncertainty around the change that we never felt that this would just explode in year one. I think when people come down and see it in year two, we might see year two of the changed version, we might see some another increase. But 130 odd teams to 170 odd teams is a nice increase. Justifies the change that we made, and it validates the fact that we've been saying there's people out there who want to access the event and they've been starved of, and we want to open it up and give them an opportunity to come and play. But we haven't busted ourselves by going to 300 teams in a 3-day event.
And in hindsight, it's probably a good time to do it with the World Cup on this year, State of Origin next year. Trying to keep it as regional. So there might have been a few people that might have been carrying niggling injuries that would be like, I'll sit NTLs out. I don't want to risk myself for the World Cup. So it's probably a really good time to do that. But anyway, not going to take up too much of your more of your time. This was filmed the day before Australia Day, so you enjoy your long weekend. And
likewise, mate.
Yeah, and I'll see you at NTLs.
For sure. And mate, it's top, but I appreciate you reaching out and taking the showing the initiative to get a balance on the discussion. We know that there's been lots of negativity about it, but yeah, appreciate you reaching out. Not many have done it. So yeah, we genuinely appreciate you reaching out and asking the questions.
Not a problem. And for those viewing this video, what I'll do is I've been sent a PDF that covers all this information in detail. I'll put that in the description. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video, and hopefully we'll see you at NTLs. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for coming along.
No troubles, mate. Appreciate it. Thank you. Cheers.